Alright, so we got the 203 spoilers, and this chapter is pretty crazy. We're getting some more insight into what Kenjaku wants, but also the purpose of Yuji, essentially, or more insight into Kenjaku's plans for Yuji. But before we get into it, let me just give you a recap of what had happened in the previous chapter, because we went like a day and a half, 2 days, somewhat into the future. The last chapter we saw that it was taking place November 16th, and Kenjaku was breaking through Tengen's barrier, coming to where he was staying along with Choso and Tsukumo, like protecting him. And he ran into Choso and more or less explained most of his plan to Choso. And afterwards, Choso was like, all right, I had enough. And at the very end of the chapter, he fired off a piercing blood at him. And that's where we're coming to in the beginning of this chapter, because Choso fights with Kenjaku as a tactic to reveal Kenjaku's abilities as much as possible to Tsukumo and Tengen. He is not afraid of being killed, citing his mother's curse, which is half of what he is and his brother's is, as his motivation. So the mother he's referring to here was like this special woman that existed, like, I guess over 150 years ago, because it was during the Meiji era. And she had like special genetics as to where she was able to have like a half human, half cursed child. And the mysterious pregnancy like caused her to be ostracized by her family. And she eventually left with that child, and she fled to a temple that was run by sorcerers. But at this time, Kenjaku had inhabited Noritoshi Kamo's body, and he forced the woman and her child to like essentially become prisoners to his experiments and whatnot. And eventually the woman had 9 pregnancies and 9 abortions, and this is how the cursed womb death paintings were made. The thing that Choso is and his brothers that we saw. And this is also why Choso is technically Yuji's brother, or half brother or whatever, because Kenjaku is both of their parents. Like Kenjaku was in Noritoshi Kamo when he was made, but we also know that Kenjaku was like in Yuji's mother when Yuji was born. Like he gave birth to Yuji. So like I said, technically they are brothers in one way or another. Kenjaku only uses low-level curses and doesn't really show any special moves, but Choso is getting beat up. He asks about Yuji's role in the big picture, and Kenjaku says, that? Nothing in particular. That thing is just a vessel. It's fulfilled its purpose. But still, as long as that thing still lives on with Sukuna, this chaos and curses will appear. Itadori Yuji is the eye of the hurricane, which is this revolution after all. It functions as an igniter after all. So that's wild. And also kind of annoying because Kenjaku's still being really vague about what's going on here, and I just want to know the answers, but it's gonna be a long time before we do. But real quick guys, let's talk about gamer subs, because they just dropped a new flavor, and it's made by fellow content creator on YouTube, J-Schlatt. Well, his new flavor is called milk. Yeah, that's right. It's called milk. And I'm sure you're wondering, like, what could that possibly taste like? Well, I'm curious myself, so I'm going to be trying it for the first time here, and I'll let you know. Of course, got my waifu cup that I always drink my gamer subs out of. Dump it in here. Well, if this is what milk actually tastes like, then sign me up, because it's pretty good. So guys, if you're interested in getting some milk or other gamer subs, and maybe a waifu cup if they're available, please check out my link in the description, or you can just use code BIGZ when you go to the gamer subs website. Thanks guys. Him saying that Yuji is a vessel, we knew this, because like I just talked about, Kenjaku like purposely took over Yuji's mother, whoever that woman was, in order to give birth to Yuji so that he could be a strong enough vessel to house Sukuna. But also him just saying that Yuji is nothing special, which he probably genuinely believes, but we the audience know that Yuji is the MC, so he is special. But it's all for the purpose of housing Sukuna, because apparently Sukuna is one of the big parts to his plan here, which I'm still not entirely sure of why. But also him saying that Yuji is the eye of the hurricane here is interesting, because like the eye of the hurricane is relatively harmless compared to the rest of it, because it's like the direct center of it, and the storm is happening directly outside of it. So I guess that means that Yuji himself is relatively weak compared to the mega powerhouses involved in this plan. plan. But once you go directly outside of the circle, then it's like extremely powerful. So he is the igniter of the revolution, as he says. But the other thing here about, as long as this still lives on with Sukuna, this chaos and curses will appear. And it's like, what does that mean? I know that this isn't the best translation right now, but it's like, okay, so the chaos and curses, does that mean in relation to just the culling game itself, or does that mean in general? Because it's like, is Sukuna somehow responsible for curses in general? And does that go more into what Angel was talking about with him being the fallen one? Is there like a bigger picture to all of this, and Sukuna is like literally some kind of ascended being or some kind of real angel or something, or devil, or it's like we still don't know. There's so many questions here, but apparently Sukuna is essential to Kenjaku's plan here, and him, I guess, ultimately returning to his full power, because he only really needs 5 fingers left, and we don't know where they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kenjaku like already has them, and they're like somewhere in the calling game right now, just waiting to be eaten by Sukuna, because I think that's what the whole in chain moment is going to be. Like, Sukuna says in chain, and then he manually eats the rest of the fingers. But I also wonder more about Sukuna's involvement because of what we found out in the previous chapter, when Kenjaku, you know, told Choso that like essentially the huge part of his plan is to merge like the 100 million people of Japan with Tengen, like after making them curses or whatever, and then using Uzumaki, you know, the maximum technique of Geto's curse spirit manipulation, and making this massive curse spirit god thing. And it's like, okay, so that makes sense for the most part, but like, what does Sukuna have to do with that? Does he want Sukuna to fight that, or does he want Sukuna to like absorb that or merge with it or take it over or something, and then that creates an even bigger nigh omnipotent curse thing? Like, that truly would ascend to the next level, essentially, was what Kenjaku ultimately wants here, evolution. But man, there's just so many questions, and hopefully the chapter on Sunday gives us better insight into this. But man, it's very fascinating, but also frustrating at the same time. Choso is enraged at the thought of Yuji being blamed, but still fails to land a hit on his father. Kenjaku explains how Geto Suguru's curse technique has the power of an army, and that is what being a special grade sorcerer means: potential to overthrow a country. Choso seems to be down for the count. He has an internal monologue over his failure of being an Oni-chan. He doesn't really care about being uninteresting, but he doesn't want anyone to call his brothers uninteresting. Choso gets up, all blazing rage, calling out, "Death Painting Brothers, fire!" And the next chapter preview says, "Go, Death Paintings, go." So that's interesting, and I guess it kind of makes sense. Maybe Choso is going to somehow resurrect the other Death Paintings because he currently has them, or at least it's implied that he does, because back in chapter 144, Choso led the group to like where Tengen essentially was staying, because before they went, they were like, you know, what about Tengen's barrier? And Choso was like, you know, let me explain. Between the doors and the tomb lies the cursed warehouse where Jujutsu High stores cursed tools and objects. It holds the remains of my younger brothers, and because of a side effect of his own curse technique, blood manipulation, he should be able to essentially sense where they are and lead them to this location, which he successfully did. And once they got through, you know, the rest of them went on to Tengen, but then we saw Choso go into the warehouse, and once he did, we could just assume that he wound up collecting the other 6 death paintings. So I guess he's going to unleash them here. They do need like a vessel to reincarnate, which I don't think he has like 6 other people just lying around. So unless he's going to do something else with them, maybe fuse them into himself, and he's going to get like this massive power up possibly, and then maybe all of the brothers get absorbed into him. Not really sure, but he's doing something with them. At least I assume he is. But let me know what you thought about this chapter in the comments, guys. And if you liked the video, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.